Good morning. Thank you for joining this webinar, Contracting 101. It is the second in a series of monthly webinars from the Alabama AAMU-RISE Foundation. It was developed as a part of a cooperative agreement with NASA in an effort to give minority-serving institutions a competitive advantage in federal contracting opportunities. Before we begin, we have a message from Mr. Clarence Bostic, who will explain the purpose of this webinar series.
Hello, my name is Clarence Bostic. I'm the MURIP Education Specialist and Music Activity Manager at NASA's Langley Research Center. MURIP is the Minority University Research and Education Program and is part of the Office of STEM Engagement for NASA. Music is one of its many projects. But what is music? Music stands for MURIP for Sustainability and Innovation Collaborative. It's a cooperative agreement for teams of minority-serving institutions, also called MSIs, and nonprofit institutions to create and provide workshops and training materials establishing sustainable support for MSIs that desire to develop their institution's capacity through the competition for federal funds. Why is music important? The expectation is that the awardees will train MSIs to develop their institutional capacity, better enabling them to compete for federal funding opportunities. These endeavors then result in successful application to and management of new funding opportunities, including those at NASA. The agreement extends MSI's capabilities by leveraging the MSI's research with NASA research to develop small business innovation research and small business technology transfer projects. Together, these partnerships develop and demonstrate innovative technologies that fulfill NASA's needs and have significant potential for successful commercialization. The music agreement also increases the preparation of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics faculty with opportunities to participate with NASA researchers and agency missions through grants and contracts. So what does music mean to you? By participating, we want you to apply for more NASA contracts, SBIR, and STTR projects, as well as other federal funds. MSIs are given additional strategies to manage their federal funding opportunities. So what do you need to do now? Take full advantage of this opportunity. Learn about NASA's resources. Participate in the process. Collaborate with other participants. Prepare your institution's capability statement. And finally, sign up for the NASA Office of Small Business Programs vendor database. Ultimately, the goal of any proposed activity or combination of activities should enable faculty and associated staff of sponsored research programs to learn to compete for and effectively manage contracts primarily, as well as grants or other federal funding sources. Thank you.
I'd like to begin by introducing myself. I am Tom Rumph, Managing Partner of Rumph and Associates. We provide professional and technical services, both commercially and to the U.S. government worldwide. Last count, we were operating under government contracts with the U.S. government in 55 countries around the world. We definitely are kindred spirits with you, as we also had to make a lot of determinations around how and what to sell to the U.S. government. While we're waiting for the slide, I'll add one other thing. We have approximately 100 employees and associates around the world. We also have offices, as the slide says, in Johannesburg, South Africa, Alpharetta, Georgia, Huntsville, Alabama, and we recently added a couple of offices, one in Accra, Ghana, and the other in Dar es Salaam in Tanzania. The webinar outline is up now, and these are the topics that we'll discuss in the webinar. You can read them a lot more quickly than I can go through them. The key thing that I believe the webinar revolves around is the deciding what to sell. and ultimately how to sell it to the U.S. government. And also, one thing I want to let you know, there is a slight slide delay, so just bear with us as we're transitioning. The next slide, we will recap contracts versus grants, and these are different vehicles that you'll utilize with dealing with the U.S. government. And this is also a recap from webinar number 1. Contracts versus grants. We discussed why minority serving colleges and universities are making the paradigm shift from grants to contracts. That discussion also focused on the most significant differences between these two ways of doing business with the government. If you didn't have an opportunity to attend that session, or if you'd like to refresh your memory, that webinar is available for a replay. It is definitely important to understand the difference between the two, because it will actually change how you operate. And as I said before, we're going to be transitioning to the next slide. And the next slide will be the most important one, or starting the most important section, which is deciding what to sell. The first thing you must do is decide what products and or services you are prepared to sell and deliver with excellence. Identifying a product or service that at least one federal government agency needs is key. And as Mr. Bostic presented in the video, you definitely have, as minority serving institutions, you have a competitive advantage, or you have an eager customer that is wanting to buy from you. At the Alabama A&M University-RISE Foundation, the 3D printing of functional electronics is amongst their core competencies. In 2016, the Hampton University Center for Atmospherics Research Education program installed a direct broadcast antenna on top of the Hampton Harbor Center in downtown Hampton, Virginia, funded by a $5 million award from NASA. This antenna enables scientists to instantly predict severe weather within a 2,000-mile radius of Hampton roads, as well as provide HU student researchers access to advanced satellite data. Deciding what to sell, the government buys just about every kind of good or services, from aircraft to paper clips, from training services to scientific research. This list of popular categories, as you see here, includes several services or goods that you as minority servicing minority servicing institutions actually have an abundant supply. Research and development services, science and professional services, information services. They have some other things on here that aren't necessarily in your wheelhouse. So one of the things we have to tell ourselves as a small business is that don't try to overreach. And that's the basis of the next slide, is being realistic about capabilities and starting with something that you know you can do well and prove yourself. Because the key thing is going to be past performance, which we'll be talking about next. And you establish your past performance with every interaction and contract that you perform with the U.S. government. And the way that they are set up, and we're waiting for the next slide to show, which will talk about past performance. The government is actually required to use past performance as a key and important attribute to make a determination about whether to award you work. One of the things that we do, or we believe internally, and I say this over and over, is that as far as the government is concerned, past performance is the best predictor of future behavior. So past performance can give your college or university a competitive advantage in the evaluation and selection process. So there are some things that you need to know about when writing your past performance response. You want to give the contracting officer confidence in your college or university's ability to satisfactorily perform contract requirements. In fact, the FAR, Federal Acquisition Regulation, has a requirement for government agencies to consider past performance information prior to making a contract award. That's why the past performance information retrieval system was designed designated as a government-wide single repository of past performance data. PPIRS consists of two components, a report card and the federal awardee performance and integrity information system. Past performance comprises a set of specific contracts that you select to demonstrate how well your team has performed on contracts that are similar in size, scope, and complexity. If your school is new to contracting, you may think that you have no past performance and will be considered unqualified when competing for a contract opportunity. When identifying your capabilities, look first at areas where you have received federal grants. In some regards, a grant is similar to a firm fixed price contract, and we actually discussed those in webinar 1. In a firm fixed price contract, you deliver an item or service for a set price. It's just like a grant. You can persuasively argue that your grants are relevant examples of past performance. The description of the work is where you stand out and distinguish your institution's capabilities. At the end of the day, the government is looking to reduce or eliminate the risk associated with getting this work done. So write your response to show that you've performed this relevant work, and then make a note of specific accomplishments that were meaningful to the government. As the current slide is showing, leverage your past performance. It can definitely give you a big advantage, and also create the right risk profile that the government is looking for. So definitely make note as you are going along the specific accomplishments that were meaningful to the government. What we do in our company, we have something called Centers of Excellence. And what we'll do is the key areas that we believe that we are great in, we will create an internal center of excellence and have that center basically document the specific accomplishments and what those accomplishments mean to the government, and communicate to them that we do have that past performance and we are excellent at it. The next thing that will help you to gain experience if you have no past performance is the Mentor Protégé program. And what this will allow you to do is to develop a relationship with the prime contractor through the NASA Mentor Protégé program. This program encourages prime contractors to assist eligible protégés, thereby enhancing the protégé's capability to perform on NASA's contracts and subcontracts. And it also fosters the establishment of a long-term business relationship between the mentor and the mentee. And what this will do is actually reduce the risk in the minds of the contracting officer and increases the overall number of companies that will receive NASA contract and subcontract awards. As you can see, there is a list of entities that are eligible to be chosen as protégés, which your entities have been highlighted. As we continue to talk about the program, the next slide will go through the process. As you can see, there are only 4 steps necessary to establish a mentor-protégé agreement. First thing you do is locate a partner, and mentor and protégés are required to establish their own counterparts. In other words, you need to, as a protégé, you need to find a mentor, and the mentor actually could also find you too. And each company has its own internal processes and procedures for locating partners. These processes are not mandated by NASA. So you definitely need to get help doing it, particularly around the areas of ensuring that you have the right mentor. And really a key thing is to make sure that culturally you fit with your mentor. Then the second thing is to determine the development assistance to be provided. And prior to doing the agreement, the mentor must perform a needs assessment of the protégé to determine what type of assistance is required. Typical examples of developmental assistance may be related to technical transfer or business infrastructure. The dollar value associated with the technical transfer should be approximately 70% of the proposed hours and costs. The remaining 30% may be related to business development tasks. Basically, the developmental assistance, again, as I talked about risk, it's definitely going to reduce the risk of doing business with you in the eyes of the agency. Then the third thing you need to do is submit the agreement for approval. The agreements are submitted to one of the NASA centers for review and endorsement. If the agreement is endorsed at the center level, it will be forwarded to the Office of Small Business at NASA headquarters for final review and approval within 3 weeks of receipt. The agreement officially begins on the date of the incorporation of the agreement into a contractual vehicle via a contract modification signed by the contracting officer. Once the agreement begins, the mentor may start providing the developmental assistance outlined. The reporting requirements include semi-annual reports, annual reports, and Protégé post-agreement reports. So you definitely need to fulfill all the reporting requirements. Dealing with the U.S. government is essentially a game of compliance. The next slide shows an example of a mentorship Protégé program. Prairie View A&M provides a good example of an HBCU using the program to build their contracting capability. You can read about the school's relationship with PAE Applied Technologies on the Knowledge Sharing Center. That's www.theknowledgesharingcenter, all spelled out.com. We talked a little bit earlier about identifying capabilities and using them to decide what products and services to sell to the government. So as you're doing that, what you'll need to do is also determine who's buying what you're selling. And there are several links here. Fed BizOps, it's the repository for all present and past requirements that have ever been posted. By law, every requirement that's subject to the FAR is obligated to go through this repository. Then you have GSA, where you can also go here and see past potential competitors' pricing, because every company's and entity's GSA schedule is there. And then you also have the Federal Procurement Data System, which reports on past purchasing actions. So let's focus on making sure that you're using the Doing the Business with the Government workbook, which was recommended as a resource in the first webinar. Module 1 contains this detailed list in the websites, and they'll give you some more information. This slide, it gives you some more information on who's actually buying and buying habits of the different agencies. And as a part of this training program, the Alabama A&M University RISE Foundation held a workshop on using NASA's acquisition forecast to plan your marketing strategy. If you're not able to attend that event, which was held at Lawson State Community College in Birmingham, Alabama, the presentations are available on the Knowledge Sharing Center. One of the most informative presentations was made by Ms. Tabisa Talawuku Kalisa from the NASA Office of Small Business Programs. She shared the top 20 NAICS codes for the space agency. Again, the government, if we can use the past performance analogy, they're going to most likely continue to do what they've done in the past. So this presentation lets you know what each of the 10 NASA centers have been purchasing. Again, this is another website. This is actually where the acquisition forecast is, and this is where you can find the detailed documents of what products and services NASA is buying now and intends to purchase through contracts in the upcoming fiscal years. The forecasts are provided in Excel spreadsheet documents which can be downloaded. These forecasts, from our company's perspective, is key as we are doing our business planning for the next year. So we will go over this one in more detail in the next webinar, which is on acquisition forecasts. Academic institutions also can collaborate with companies to propose projects to NASA and other federal agencies through the Small Business Innovation Research, SBIR, and Small Business Technology Transfer, STTR. At the beginning of every calendar year, NASA announces the areas of interest for contracts it will award. In 2018, there were 22 focus areas. NASA even has a database of patents that universities can receive a license to advance the research and commercialize the technology. The next NASA SBIR STTR award cycle begins January 7th, 2019, which is right around the corner. In addition to NASA, other agencies have SBIR STTR opportunities, including the Department of Energy and the Department of Homeland Security. Again, a little bit more on who's buying what you're selling. In 2017, the National Institutes of Health launched the Path to Sustainability project to increase the number and dollar value of federal biomedical research contracts awarded to minority serving colleges and universities. The biomedical space and public health space is actually where our company plays, and there's even a lot more money out there outside of the National Institutes of Health, and it would be under HHS and the CDC. So a little more about who's buying what you're selling. The availability of such contracting opportunities have been impacted by Executive Order 13779, which encourages promoting excellence and innovation at HBCUs. The executive order requires federal agencies to enhance HBCU's capability to compete for federal procurement. Earlier this month, the U.S. Department of Commerce's Minority Business Development Agency announced awards of nearly $2 million to 4 historically Black colleges and universities to increase their ability to compete for and receive federal research and development funds, establish partnerships with federal laboratories and other resources, increase science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, STEM entrepreneurship, and also to compete for federal awards. The government does a lot with regards to minority serving institutions to ensure that they support them. And this is a lot more than what they do for businesses in the contracting space. Your initial contracting opportunities may not come directly from a federal agency, but instead from other contractors, particularly an agency's prime contractor. In our business, starting out as a subcontractor is typically the way to go. Again, it helps with the risk profile and it helps you develop past performance without the pressure of being the prime contractor. A subcontractor, by definition, is the one that works for or works with a prime contractor, and again, they can help you with past performance. One of the strongest reasons is to begin a subcontract is you can generate revenue while, which can be encouraging to your faculty and key administrators who may be skeptical about expanding into the contracting arena. As I mentioned before, most businesses start as a subcontractor. Prime contracts are typically initially difficult to obtain for new government contractors. And again, that's typically because of the past performance issue. But subcontracting is a good way to learn about it without all the pressure. There's one other thing. Large businesses with prime contracts exceeding $650,000 must have a plan to subcontract with small businesses. And in that arena, you as a minority serving institution, you can qualify for some of those too, or help them meet their small business goals. Don't fear the FAR. It's important to remember that contracts are not gifts. The government isn't giving your school money. Your faculty and staff are competing for the contract and must abide by its terms and conditions, which are governed by the Federal Acquisition Regulation, also known as the FAR. This link will take you to the website. You need to become familiar with it. However, do not try to boil the ocean with it, but it's a lot of information there, but don't fear it. Just use it to understand the rules. The FAR is divided into 53 parts. Parts 1 through 51 detail all the regulations. Part 52 has provisions and clauses, and Part 53 is where you'll find required forms. And subpart 26.3 specifies the regulations governing HBCUs, or historically black colleges, universities, and minority institutions. Again, don't fear the FAR, and definitely get help. So let's talk a little bit about some of the next steps. So, you've decided what to sell, and you know how to identify what government agencies are buying, including the 10 NASA centers, and you also have access to the rule book, the FAR. So what do you do now? And most businesses and colleges and universities, 90 days is a good planning horizon as you're starting something new, because what it'll do is it'll help you establish your internal rhythm as you're trying to figure out how to attack this. So you can start by creating a 90-day action plan, and the Doing Business with the Government workbook will definitely help you with this. And I can't overemphasize that you need to ask questions and get help. And so let's go through some of the specific detailed next steps. The first thing you have to do, if you don't have a DUNS number, you have to get one. You cannot complete you can't register for the SAM if you don't have a DUNS number. And if you aren't registered in SAM, you can't register for anything else, and you cannot actually even be awarded a contract. So if you haven't already done so, please complete all the necessary registrations that were discussed in webinar 1. So we'll continue on with next steps. And as I said, just please get help, reach out, and definitely ask questions. So an important step in your 90-day plan will be contacting the small business specialist. Each federal agency has one. Ours has been, and this is our company, the small business specialists that we've used with the CDC and USAID. Those guys were key to us getting in, knowing the right people to talk to, and moving forward. So after you do the steps on the previous slide to get registered, identify the person in the agency, the small business person in the agency that you've targeted, and set up a meeting. Keep in mind your approach and your execution with regards to having a conversation can vary from agency to agency. However, basically what they are responsible for is going to hold true across all the organizations. The small business specialist will act as a small business advocate and interface on behalf of small businesses with the government contracting officers, the contract specialists, and the end users. And they will support the business in preparing to successfully integrate yourself into the contracting process and obtain awards. Small business specialists will also guide marketing efforts such as industry days to assist in locating additional small businesses, as well to help with the contracting officer, to bridge the gap with the contracting officer, and also find organizations like yourself that can successfully perform the task. Long story short, the small business specialist is going to be your best friend starting out. Resources. The PDF version of the slides from today's webinar will be available on our web portal, www.theknowledgesharingcenter.com. A recorded version of the webinar will also be available for on-demand replay. There are other valuable resources on the site to assist you in taking advantage of contracting opportunities. And as I've said before, please get help, ask questions. Recommended reading, another resource, doing business with the U.S. government. This workbook is designed to provide a general overview of the key aspects of government contracting. This resource will supplement the information provided in the webinar, and we've also referenced this workbook a couple of times in the webinar, and it will give you other websites to resources and will help you in developing your 90-day plan of action. On the next slide is links to 2 additional resources that we mentioned earlier, the NIH presentation on the path to sustainability and the NASA acquisition forecast workshop presentation. Again, these are ultimately key. That gives you a lot of insight into what they're buying. The next slide will give you some details on some additional contract readiness training, and it will be the next webinar. And it's on acquisition forecasting. It'll be held January 29th, 2019. Mark your calendars and save the date. And then also on March 22nd, there'll be a workshop at Lawson State Community College. One of the things I'll say with regards to the government contracting space is that waiting is not necessarily a good strategy. So again, you can reach out to the RISE Foundation and get additional information even in advance of these training sessions. Okay, so here's what we've covered today, and that slide will be coming up soon, and I'll go through it. Again, we did a recap of webinar 1, contracts versus grants. Number 2, deciding what to sell. And what I'll add there is deciding what to sell is you have to take a realistic look at yourself, which is being realistic about your capabilities. And capabilities are comprised of 2 things, what you can do now and what you got the ability to grow into. Then the next thing is leveraging past performance, and it's just taking a critical look at what you've done in the past. This is where I would be aggressive at what you've done in the past, and I think as we mentioned, or as I mentioned earlier, you need to ensure that you, I don't want to use the word stretch, but make sure that you've taken a hard look at everything that you've done and is possible applicability to what some of these government agencies are buying. We got the Mentor Protégé program we discussed, who's buying what you're selling. That's going through the acquisition forecast and some of the other resources and making sure that you got a good idea of what these entities are buying. Please don't fear the far. And the 90-day plan, definitely start that. If you are wanting to do something in this space, start that immediately. So we'll take a couple of questions. We'll take about 5 minutes, and you can type those into the chat, and we'll go through and answer those. And obviously, if you think of something after this webinar is ended, you can send the questions to the address here on the slide. So if we have any questions, this is a good time for them now. As I said, we'll take a couple. Okay, I don't see any questions. So I assume that you're all experts at this point. And as I mentioned, if you think of something after the webinar is ended, you can send the questions into the address here on the slide. And also the slides will be available on the PMP website. So thanks for your attention, and good luck and happy contracting.